And good morning, everyone. I still made the morning, I think, today. I did. So, by the way, I wanted to show you paper. I know some of you think I get it electronically. Look, I'm an old guy. I really still believe in touching and feeling a real newspaper. And I get it delivered to my porch every single morning. And I love to be able to write on the paper and big circle an article that I want to share with you, cross out something else I don't, and actually put some notes on them. Sometimes hard to find room in newsprint to print notes on, but I figure out a way to get some on there. So glad to share the Wall Street Journal with you today, and I've got 6 great articles I think you might find interesting. Sorry I missed you. My birthday was yesterday. I am now sitting in a brand new mesh office chair. I've always wanted them because the other ones get so hot and they fall apart after a time. And so I went down to a furniture liquidators and got a real nice deal on a nice mesh office chair, which I'm really enjoying. By the way, if you missed one of my reports, Wall Street Journal said the office liquidator stores are doing a tremendous business on these chairs because people stranded at home had found out they had a really lousy office chair at home, and were finding after 8-9 hours a day that it was killing them. So they were going after new chairs. And I talked to the sales lady, and she says, "Yeah, at the height of when COVID in March and April, she says I was selling a chair every 15 minutes." He said, she says, hardest I've ever worked. And she said, so lots of home offices have been upgraded, and she shared that with me. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So I'm going to pull up a screen here. Sorry. So first of all, I was going to talk about the first article is it looks like COVID-19 has delayed a lot of college freshman plans. So it's interesting. It's affected the freshmen more than anyone else. And it looks like, they've just put their college plans on delay. And so overall, the college freshman count in the U.S. is down 16.1%. And so if you look at the graph here, Wall Street Journal kind of clustered it in groupings. The private for-profit schools, by the way, have gone up about 3 or 4%. But the private nonprofit 4-year is down about 12%. The public 4-year is down about 14%. Overall, 16%. Public 2-year, really community colleges, what I think most of us would call community college, is down over 25%. So college has taken a dramatic hit. And, my quick observation would be, okay, I think colleges have needed to do something to fix their economy. And their tuition increases have just gone crazy, and this may force them. But at the same time, you need to observe those economies. Those college towns are a big deal. And just think of freshmen down, 16%. If they're taking a 16% hit, the landlords, the store owners, the restaurant owners, I hope not the bars for freshmen, but that's a huge impact to a lot of college towns that their economy really rests on this. And I don't know if you'll see a delayed incoming this year, or I suspect they've just put it off for a year and they're off doing something else for a year, and they'll hopefully come back next year. But we'll see where that is. But a quick article there. So the other thing I wanted to share with you, and sorry about this, cancer screening. So I apologize. I can only stage one graph at a time in my application I'm using. But so if you look at this cancer screening, the red bar here is in 2020, and you can see that the far left of the graph is February 20th, far right is August 2020, and they're measuring the cancer screenings that happened over the past 3 years. And you can see really the past 2 years, 18 and 19, a really consistent cancer screening. Gets higher, a little bit higher as the year goes on, maybe takes a couple dips. Interesting, must be around holidays or something. I didn't look at that. 2 identical dips, the 2 years. But if you look at this year, screening took a huge dip. And so the scale here is 8,000 screenings versus about 2,000 on the lower side there. So you can see that screenings just dropped off. So you got to ask yourself, what does this mean when you see this drop of cancer screening? Now, we all know the sooner you can't catch cancer, the better off you are. So what does this mean later this year, next year? Increased deaths, right? That it'll be we call background deaths. It won't be attributed to COVID. And in fact, the Wall Street Journal article carried some stories, and one of them, he clearly in February needed to be scanned. He was on a 6-month scanning schedule, and he waited 6 months. And in that 6 months, the cancer grew too large for them to control going forward, and it's going to end up taking his life. And sad story, and the family's a little frustrated right now, but it's what they did. So we'll see that come on as we go through later this year or next year. But that's a sad side effect. And when different politicians and scientists have said, look, when you do a lockdown, there's a whole bunch of unintended consequences you have that nobody got a chance to discuss with you. So, and I've talked about this before, life is risk assessment. And I look at, by the way, the mask as a risk assessment. I look at it this way, is I'm not sure I believe the science is settled, but the risk is enough, and I believe it lowers the risk enough that I'm going to wear a mask out in public and when I can. So, I look at that and say, that's where my risk assessment is. And so people make risk assessments all the time, but we went into lockdown, and I don't think we had the full story of what would happen to our students, what would happen to suicide rate, what would happen to cancer rate, what would happen to locking up people in nursing homes and not let them see them and their families. That drop in lifestyle, what was going to happen. So I think that's something we needed to consider, and we weren't given a chance at all of the data. It was a quick decision. It obviously made by politics, political figures, and they make quick decisions. They are the worst at looking at unintended consequences by far. Lots of companies draw a whiteboard up, and they sit in a room for a couple hours, get coffee in there and donuts, and they say, what can happen if we make this decision? What's the negative opinion? Politicians are in a hurry to make their people happy, and and some people say to take advantage of the fear, take advantage of the opportunity, and strike quickly. So third article, moving along quickly here, the Barrett hearing. So Senator Whitehouse made some allegations against Amy Coney Barrett on her associations in speaking at the Federalist Society. And so he's a Democrat, so obviously he was making some links to dark money. So what he says is, look, she spoke at these functions, got paid probably for them, and they're funding her somehow, and they're funding her with dark money. And that what that means is you can't see who made the donation. And of course, the reason Senator Whitehouse and many people on the left right now, by the way, it happens, same thing on the right. why they want to know, and they don't like dark money, is they want to go attack the donors, and they want to attack them personally. And they need their names and need the amount of money they donated to go attack them personally. And by the way, this is what we call the cancel culture. So what's interesting about this is Justice Ginsburg, who Barrett is supposedly replacing, also spoke at the Federalist Society. No mention of that, right? And by the way, what's interesting about it, Ginsburg in her life fought numerous Supreme Court cases and was on the side of saying we protect anonymity. I have trouble with that word, anonymity. And she feared what would happen if those names became public. And her fear was founded. They would be a cancel culture. They would go and attack those people personally. I give to multiple, not a lot, but I give to multiple nonprofits. Generally, I'm okay with people knowing who I give to, but I typically don't give to more controversial places. So would I want my name to be associated with them? No, of course. It's an anonymous donation, and I want to keep it that way. It's between me and that organization. They know who I am, and that's all that's needed. We don't transparency. People want unlimited amounts of transparency, and with it come lots of issues that we don't want to deal with. So, fourth article, Twitter censors. So, you know the story by now. As well as it's been trying to be hidden by Twitter and Facebook, everybody knows the story of Twitter and Facebook blocking the Hunter Biden email story that supposedly have a hard drive of his of laptops, 3 laptops he took in for service, supposedly inebriated when he took them in to a guy that's legally blind. He only sees a few feet. He thought it was Hunter that brought it in, but he wasn't sure. And so, and by the way, he went after Hunter, and Hunter wouldn't come back and pick him up. So therefore, he has a contract that supposedly Hunter signed that said they're his property after a number of months. So the story sounds crazy, but to a lot of people, it sounds so crazy it has to be believable, right? If you wanted to make up, and if you're a Russian troll and you wanted to insert Hunter Biden emails to destroy Joe Biden at this point, 4 weeks before the election, would you have made up a story like this? I don't think so. So that's what I look at. But I still don't know, and you don't either, probably. But so what Twitter used is a policy they have that if the material is hacked or private material that person hasn't acknowledged and allowed to be put in the public sphere, then therefore they're not going to support that information. Okay, so so that's what they're using to say it appears to be hacked data. Now, of all the stories we've heard right now, it doesn't appear to be hacked, and they believe they have a contract in hand that says he allowed this material to go into this person's hands after a certain number of times, so a month's time. So now this person owns a hard drive. It's their hard drive. It's up to them what to do with that data. So seems clear cut to me, but maybe the story will change. Some of these stories change, and I've always preached to you, be patient. Wait till the story comes out. So the issue Twitter and Facebook is going to have here, and this is the issue you have when you become the arbiter of what's right and wrong. It's a very difficult task to take on, and they did not know what they were doing when they took this on. And they should have saw this coming. I did. Many other people saw it coming. So you look back, year 2017 to 2018, the Justice Department opened 208 criminal references for leaks of classified information. So that's government leaks of government information. Okay, 208 of them. So wouldn't you have thought that all 208 of those leaks that, by the way, journalists use to publish stories. We all know how that works. We saw many of those stories. Wouldn't you have thought that Twitter would have said, no, that's a hack? I call that a hack because that's classified information. It's not supposed to go into public sphere without release and looking at will the classified information damage anything. So the problem that Twitter had to see, you would think had to see, is somebody smart is going to go out there and say, wait a minute, you let all this stuff that is harmful against Republicans in the public sphere, and you didn't block any of it. So who are the arbiters, by the way? Well, we know it must not be Jack Dorsey, the guy that runs Twitter, because he came out and apologized right away. And I thought that was pretty interesting. He had a clear-cut apology right at the front of what his statement is. Not like, I did this because this and this is. He said, I apologize. We did poor communication. Now, he's still blocking the information. So his apology only goes so far. He thought they should have at least had a reason, a clear reason posted so that people understood why it was being blocked. I don't think it would have helped. People would have, on the Republican side, would have said, wait a minute, I can show you instances. By the way, the tax returns, the private tax returns of Trump that the New York Times has, seems to me to fall into the same category. So who are the arbiters? I don't know. They're somewhere down in the company. We don't ever get to see them, right? They're the puppet behind the curtain. But what's interesting here is Twitter and Facebook and social media companies could be fighting a war on multiple fronts. If you're an army, you always would like to fight the war on one front. All your resources are tied up there. You're not split between two fronts and figuring out what to do. But it's interesting if you look at it, and here's my observation. The Democrats right now have already been coming after the social media companies, including Amazon, by the way, for their and it's an anti-capitalist type attack. And you're too big, and we got to break you up. And you know, you're capitalist. You're making too much money, taking over too many operations. Your search criteria ignores the little guy, and everything goes to your business first. So they're attacking them from that front. And now here comes Republicans saying, we want you in a hearing next week in the House, and we want to talk to you about your censoring and this the Section 203 that protects them right now as being a platform versus, you know, a news source. So so why would social media fight a war on two fronts? I think some smart people have gotten some boardrooms lately and said, Jack Dorsey, Mark, what are we doing here? Can you fight this war on two fronts? And by the way, can you win it? And can you defend what you did with the Biden email story? We'll see more of that come out, and we'll follow it. I'm sure the Wall Street Journal will be following it, and we'll see more articles on that. But it's interesting going forward. Article number 5. I want to pull up another one here, another screen here. And so, I shared the wrong one. I apologized. Share screen. Apologize. So what we've got here is an article about EU passing the US in daily COVID cases. And so quietly, you've heard the politicians, in the last couple debates, you haven't heard anything about, oh, this is a leadership problem in the US. And if you heard me, if you've been watching me, I predicted this would happen. To say that COVID has a direct relationship to the person who runs the country is idiotic. And not based on any science that anybody could ever use. And by the way, fraught with peril with too many comparisons that you can't make. Culture comparisons, geography, temperature of the geography, how much testing is being done. I mean, there's I say a million, but there's probably a good 20 different differences you could show. And so it gets, but it's very convenient when you're a politician, you want to say how bad Trump has done or how bad Biden would have done, you would use this. But so what we've seen here is the red line is the EU, and this is the cases. This is a 7-day average, so it prevents all them spikes from showing up, smooths out the graph. Very good way to graph this kind of data. This guy knows what he's doing when he graphs this. And of course, the U.S. is on top. And you saw that the EU was first. They climbed first. The U.S. followed close behind, went higher, stayed up high, and then took another big peak. Nobody knows why, by the way. The science is still unclear on this. And by the way, the EU didn't. It gradually went down, but now it's going up, 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 and it hasn't stopped. And it's now past, by the way, the EU now has 152 cases per 1 million people. The US is 150. So they're really neck and neck, EU slightly higher. The EU has lower daily deaths. Right now, the EU is having 1 death per day per 1 million residents. The US is 2 deaths per day. So the death rate is actually twice as high, though it's still 2 deaths per day per 1 million residents. It's still very low. So what's going on with this? I don't know. There's another graph I'm not going to show you, but there's another graph that shows the density of cases in the US, and it's very interesting. It's the upper Midwest. It's not the West Coast, East Coast, none of the South. There's little isolation places, but the darker areas, the more dense and the more cases are upper Midwest. Is that temperature? Scientists have told us that we need to be prepared for wintertime, that the COVID cases may go up. We go inside, right? We're closer. We're not social distancing as much. Outside restaurants close, the porches close, patios, and so on. So, and by the way, Roger just shared here that the death rate lags case rate by a minimum of 10 days. So that's a good point, and you may see that that death rate in the U.S. Will start dropping. It's compared to the EU, and we because normally about 10 days, I think Roger used 10 days too. So that's the 10 days is the statistical norm that they've seen in the U.S. When they saw a spike in cases, they had to wait 10 days later to see. Obviously, it takes you 10 days to die. There should be no humor in this, and I hope Roger didn't intend any humor. I'm sure he didn't. But you have to go to intensive care, sit around. They do everything they can for you, and 10 days later, you tend to die. In fact, some friends of mine in the emergency room says sometimes they're taking 3 weeks to die, that they really hang on a long time. So we'll watch that and see as that happens. But I'm glad that it proved me right in this case. I'm wrong in so many cases. It proved me right that said when you compare leaders to their COVID cases and directly attribute that to the leader, you've asked for way too much causation, and it's not there. So last article today, school pod's enemy. So if you've watched my podcast for any time, I've talked to you about these school pods, and I've seen them in my own neighborhood. I'm in an upper class type neighborhood, not a rich neighborhood, but more upper middle class. And I saw it right away happen. Parents got around real quickly. These are smart people. They get on the internet, they get with their neighbors and say, look, we're not going to let our kids' education lag. We're not going to let our kids out in the street and play while the government tries to figure out when they're going to do school next. And so they put these small pods together, 6 to 10 students in a neighborhood, in a house, and cleared out a living room, an open area, and put the kids in there, hired a teacher, full-time teacher, and said, keep our kids educated. And so these pods have been taken off. Huge success. And by the way, there's two companies behind them, one called Prenda, Prenda, and another called Schoolhouse. And so both of them really provide the infrastructure. We should call it the back office part of school, right? So you got to have textbooks, you got to have a curriculum, and so they provide all of that to these pod schools. And by the way, there's very little infrastructure needed. They need the textbooks and stuff, and the curriculum. They need a teacher, and they need some room in a house with some desks. Pretty easy thing to put together. Not a lot of money. So I talked about one teacher, about 10 students. By the way, the teachers make about 10 to 20% more in income than they were making before in teaching a full classroom. So get this, we lowered the class size to a third of the previous classroom. Let's assume, Roger will correct me, he knows all about school districts, but they went from a class size of 30 maybe to a class size of 10 or less. They make more money. They've got no administration, no forms to sign at the end of the day, nobody checking into their classroom, and the kids are getting a good education. The parents are very happy, and parents are really involved in it, okay? But here's how they're doing it, and this is real interesting. So you say, well, how are they getting tuition assistance? How are they getting any state money? So what they're attaching themselves through this organization called Prenda and Schoolhouse, they attach themselves to local charter schools. So they become a remote classroom for a local charter school. This is brilliant. It's just brilliant. It may fall apart very quickly, but I think it's brilliant. So they attach themselves as an arm of the charter school. So therefore they get tuition assistance, and the parents don't have to put in as much money as you would think because they're being paid through the charter school. So who would you think would have huge problems with this? As one of my friends said, that one of the number one problems of running a school district is dealing with school unions, teachers unions, NEA, and amongst other ones. So the unions are fighting this. And by the way, the latest thing in this Wall Street Journal article is a 200-page article they've submitted on the danger of these. And interesting part of the article talked about how it would affect minorities in inner schools. This is the very group that's having the worst education with public education. And the unions are going to pick on that group, right? That group that's, by the way, lined up to get into any charter school that opens. They don't have enough seats in charter schools in inner cities because the parents are trying to get their kids in there. So one of of course, the recommendations the unions are making are saying, make it a death of 1,000 cuts. So what they're saying, go after them with any regulation you can. Use city regulations, like some of them are fighting these pods, saying you're a de facto daycare. So therefore, if you're a daycare, you have to be inspected every XYZ period. You have to have background checks. You have to, check safety. All the regulations, right, that come with government schools, and you have to deal with them. So the unions are attacking in that matter to go against the charter schools, and obviously these arms, these called iPods, these pod schools in local neighborhoods. But what NEA is really saying is, we want to govern. In fact, they said this in a position statement. We want to govern the pod schools. Now tell me how that's going to work. Is the teacher going to make 20% more? Are there going to be some admin people dropping by a couple times a week and changing everything. Are there going to be more forms to sign? Of course, we all know that. So we've now come up with something that's very successful. It required Americans. Americans are innovative. I'll add this is they really are innovative, and they will come up and protect their kids. It's the mama bear, right? They want to make sure their kids get good education, and they've come through in this pod schools. It's unfortunate. I think it doesn't help all neighborhoods. All neighborhoods can't fit into this model, but I can tell you there's some in my neighborhood that have not closed down once school went back. And we're going to see these numbers a little bit later. We'll start to see school attendance numbers, and all of the indications so far is charter schools have gained, private schools have gained, homeschooling is and the pods are going to come under a homeschooling charter school type number, but they've all gained dramatically. So let's watch those numbers as we go forward. But I think this will put more pressure on the public schools and on the unions to go solve this problem and to get a better education for our kids. So that's my wrap for today. I'm glad you joined me to read a great paper and share some good articles. Hope you find it interesting. Appreciate your comments, and have a great day. See you tomorrow. Cheers.